Hello everyone.
About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did.
I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Story 1. Interview all morning. I woke up early, ironed my shirt, and cleared a quiet space in the living room to set up my laptop. I wanted everything to look professional, down to the lighting and background. I double-checked my internet connection and rehearsed my introduction a few times. I had been looking forward to this opportunity and did not want anything to go wrong. Just before the call, I logged in a few minutes early to make sure everything was working. My webcam was already on, and I caught my reflection on the screen. Something about the background struck me as strange. It looked familiar, but not like the part of my living room I had prepared. My heart skipped as I realized I was looking at my bedroom. At first, I thought I had somehow changed the room without noticing, but that made no sense. Then it hit me. The Zoom background was not live video from my living room, but a still image of my bedroom. My bed was visible, unmade, with the pillow and blanket crumpled, just as I had left it that morning. I immediately turned off the camera and scrambled to check the settings. I opened the virtual background tab and saw that the current setting was showing an image labeled as default, but it was not one I had chosen. I had never set my bedroom as a background, and I never remembered taking a picture like that. I felt a chill run through me. I switched to a neutral background and turned the camera back on, trying to keep calm. The interview was about to start, and I needed to stay focused. But inside, my mind was racing. How did that image get there? Who had access to my Zoom account? Had someone been in my room without me knowing? The interviewer appeared on screen, and I forced myself to smile and greet them. I kept my answers confident and clear, hoping they had not seen the bedroom image. The interview lasted about 30 minutes. I answered all the questions, asked a few of my own, and thanked them for their time. It felt like I had done well, but I could not stop thinking about the background incident. After the call, I shut my laptop and walked to my room. I stood in the doorway, looking at the bed, the pillow, and the blanket. It matched exactly what I had seen in the Zoom background. There was no doubt now. That image had been taken recently, maybe that same morning, and uploaded without my knowledge. I started going through my computer settings and files, looking for anything suspicious. I checked the image folders, but nothing stood out. Then I opened the Zoom app again and browsed through the background settings more carefully. When I hovered over the image of my room, a small timestamp appeared. It had been created just 2 days ago. I felt violated. I lived alone, and there was no reason for that image to exist. I started wondering if my laptop had been hacked or if there was some kind of spyware installed. I ran a security scan and waited nervously while the program combed through files and settings. My stomach tightened as I imagined someone watching me through my webcam. The scan completed without showing any major threats, but that did not explain how the image got there. I decided to take further precautions. I covered my webcam with a small piece of tape and changed all my passwords. I enabled two-step verification on every account I could think of. I wanted to believe it was some kind of strange glitch, but my gut told me otherwise. Later that night, I barely slept. Every sound made me sit up and listen. I kept checking the door locks and windows. I did not feel safe in my own apartment, and that feeling clung to me for days. I even considered staying with a friend, but I could not explain the situation without sounding paranoid. I needed proof. The next day, I called customer support for the Zoom platform. I explained the situation carefully and asked if there was any way to track when the image was uploaded or by what device. The representative was polite, but could not provide much help beyond suggesting I update the app and check my settings. I ended the call feeling more frustrated than reassured. I decided to do more investigating on my own. I checked the logs of my home Wi-Fi and looked at the list of connected devices. Nothing unfamiliar appeared, but I noticed that my laptop had been active during hours when I was not using it. That made my heart sink. Someone or something had been turning it on remotely. I contacted a local computer technician and explained everything to them in person. They agreed to inspect the laptop for any hidden software or backdoor access points. I left the device with them for a day and waited for the results. It was nerve-wracking, not knowing what they would find. When I picked it up the next day, the technician confirmed my suspicions. There had been a hidden program running in the background that could take screenshots and access files. It was likely installed through a phishing link or a malicious update. They removed the program, reset key settings, and suggested a few additional precautions to prevent future issues. The moment I heard that, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. I had been watched. My privacy had been invaded. But at least now I knew how it happened. I took their advice seriously, updating all my systems and installing better protection software. I also bought a physical webcam cover and made it part of my daily routine. Weeks went by, and the fear slowly began to fade. I no longer felt watched, and my routine started to return to normal. I received an email from the company where I had done the Zoom interview. They were offering me the position. That moment felt surreal. I had spent so much time worried about what they might have seen, and it turned out they had been impressed with me. I accepted the offer and started work remotely the following week. I made sure every virtual meeting was done with care, using a clean and controlled background. No surprises, no distractions, just focus and confidence. I learned to take control of my space in a new way. That strange experience changed how I approached digital life. I used to think that online security was mostly about passwords and spam filters. But now I understood that it was about constant awareness and protecting your physical environment too. I also learned to listen to my instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The incident never repeated. My laptop remained clean, and the strange screenshot never appeared again. The job turned out to be fulfilling, and I even found myself enjoying the virtual work environment. Despite the frightening start, I made it through with clarity and strength. That picture of my bedroom never defined me. How I responded to it did. Story 2. But it was a quiet afternoon, and I had just boarded the train after a long meeting downtown. The car was only half full, and I was relieved to find an empty seat by the window. I settled in, took out my phone, and leaned back. The vibration buzzed softly in my pocket, a reminder that I had meant to respond to a voice message request earlier. I quickly recorded a message and sent it, thinking nothing of it. The message was private, personal even, something I would never want overheard in public. I had spoken openly about a situation involving someone close to me, with names, emotions, and all the raw honesty that came from being tired. It was not the kind of thing I would say in front of strangers. I triple-checked to make sure it went to the right person. Once sent, I put my phone away and stared out the window as the train rumbled forward. Not even 2 minutes later, I heard my own voice echoing through the train. It started quietly, and for a moment I thought I was imagining things. Then it grew louder, clearer. The exact words I had just spoken in that voice message were now coming out of a portable speaker across the aisle. My stomach dropped, but the sound was unmistakable. It was my voice, and it was word for word the private message I had recorded. A man a few seats ahead of me was holding a small speaker, and the sound was playing from his direction. I felt frozen, unsure if I was mistaken or if this was really happening. My heart started pounding as I watched him adjust the volume like it was just another song. I shot up from my seat and moved closer, needing to confirm what I already feared. As I got closer, I heard my message continue, including the parts about things that only a few people knew. My cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. I could barely process how this was even possible. I asked him why he was playing my voice on his speaker. He looked at me with surprise, then confusion, and said he had no idea what I was talking about. He claimed someone had sent the audio anonymously and that he had just opened it without listening first. I demanded to see his phone, which he refused. Other passengers began to glance over, some awkward, some curious. I felt exposed and helpless. I stepped away, back to my seat, and pulled out my phone again. I checked the sent message. It was still showing as delivered to the correct contact. There was no indication it had been forwarded or leaked. My mind raced through possibilities. Could my phone have been hacked? Could someone have intercepted the audio? I sat frozen, my pulse racing, watching the man who was now quietly scrolling through his device as if nothing had happened. The message had finished playing, but the damage was done. A few people had clearly heard enough to recognize the tone and content. I could see them glancing my way, pretending not to have listened. It felt like my privacy had been stripped away in seconds. When the train reached the next stop, the man with the speaker stood and exited without a word. I wanted to follow him, to confront him again, but I was still in shock. Instead, I stayed put, trying to piece together what had happened. I stared at my phone, wondering how something so personal had ended up so public. I replayed every step in my head, but it made no sense. That night, I ran a full security scan on my phone and changed all my passwords. I checked with the person I had sent the voice message to, and they swore they had not shared it with anyone. They had not even opened it until hours later. That meant whoever played it on the train got access before the intended recipient ever heard it. I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Over the following days, I kept a low profile. I paid attention to every notification, every unfamiliar sound, every person who looked my way for too long. Paranoia crept in like a slow fog. I started wondering what else could have been accessed. Emails, notes, even photos. I had no proof, but something felt deeply wrong. Eventually, I visited a professional to have my phone examined. They found no malware, no obvious breaches. They suggested it might have been a rare glitch or an app vulnerability. That was no comfort. I knew what I heard on that train. I knew it was not my imagination. Someone had heard my private message and played it for others to hear. One night, while reviewing my app permissions, I found something strange. A third-party app I barely remembered installing had background microphone access, but it had been running the same hour I recorded the voice message. I immediately deleted it, revoked all unnecessary permissions, and filed a report. It was the only possible link I could find to the breach. Weeks passed, and nothing like that happened again. but I never forgot the feeling of hearing my own voice spill out in a public space hijacked by someone else. It made me think twice about what I shared and how I shared it. I began taking extra steps to protect my privacy. I used encrypted apps, limited my data exposure, and kept my devices updated. Despite the fear and confusion, I tried not to let the experience consume me. I had to remind myself that I had taken control back. I had learned something important, even if it came at a high emotional cost. I now understood how vulnerable we all are in a digital world. That realization, though painful, made me more aware and more resilient. In time, I was able to move forward. The anxiety faded, replaced by a quiet strength. I no longer feared that my voice could be stolen again. I had learned how to safeguard it. I no longer carried the shame or shock of that day on the train. Instead, I carried a resolve to stay alert and guarded in ways that still let me live openly. Sometimes when I sit on a train or a bus now, I look around and remember what happened. I listen to the quiet hum of strangers, wondering if any of them have had similar moments. I feel a kinship with anyone who has had their privacy invaded and had to reclaim it. And I always double-check the settings on my phone, not out of fear, but out of wisdom earned. Story 3. I had stepped into the coffee shop to escape the humid afternoon. The air conditioning felt like a relief as I joined the small line near the counter. The place was quiet except for the low hum of the espresso machine and the soft chatter of a couple seated by the window. I had a notepad with me, intending to get some work done while enjoying a cold brew. The barista behind the counter greeted everyone with a calm smile and seemed friendly but focused. When it was my turn, I placed my order and reached into my bag to scribble something down I didn't want to forget. My pen slipped out of my hand and rolled across the counter toward the barista. He caught it before it hit the floor and looked at it for a moment. "Do you mind if I borrow this for a bit?" he asked. I nodded and told him it was no problem. I stepped aside while waiting for my drink, watching him place my pen on a small clipboard next to the register. I found a seat near the middle of the shop and set up my things. My back was to the counter, but I could still hear the faint clinking of cups and conversation. I pulled out my laptop and tried to focus on the draft I had started earlier that morning. A few minutes passed before I heard a scratchy sound behind me, something like a pencil or pen gliding quickly across paper. Curious, I turned slightly in my seat and glanced over my shoulder. The barista was standing at the far end of the counter, leaning over the clipboard, moving my pen quickly in smooth, practiced strokes. What caught me off guard was the image forming on the page. He was sketching, but it was not just any sketch. It was my face. Every detail, down to the curve of my jaw and the shape of my eyes, was captured with eerie precision. I stared for a moment longer, trying to convince myself that maybe I was imagining it. But the outline of my hair and the angle of my head matched the exact position I had been sitting in when I first arrived. I turned back around, unsure what to do. My stomach tightened. Why would someone draw me like that without asking? And why use my own pen? I debated whether I should confront him or just leave once my drink was ready. The normalcy of the setting made the situation feel even stranger. He brought over my coffee a minute later and smiled again, polite as ever. He placed the drink beside my laptop and asked if I needed anything else. I forced a smile and said no, though I avoided meeting his eyes. He walked back to the counter, and I caught another glance at the drawing still in progress. He had added more detail. My expression looked thoughtful, just like how I had felt when I was first writing. I packed up my things quickly, the discomfort growing stronger with every second. Before I left, I approached the counter slowly and asked if I could have my pen back. He looked slightly surprised, then nodded and handed it over without saying much. I waited for him to mention the sketch, to offer an explanation, but he said nothing. As I walked out, I kept thinking about the drawing. It had been far too accurate to be a coincidence or a quick sketch. It felt personal, almost invasive. But he had not said or done anything else to make me feel unsafe. I told myself maybe he was just an artist who sketched people out of habit. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I went back to the same coffee shop at around the same time. He was there again, working behind the counter with the same calm demeanor. When he noticed me, he offered a small nod, nothing more. I ordered a drink and sat near the window this time, partly to watch and partly to feel less exposed. He did not ask to borrow anything this time, nor did he appear to be sketching. I stayed for about 30 minutes, trying to focus on my writing, but my attention kept drifting. Nothing unusual happened that day, which made me question whether I had overreacted. Still, the drawing had been too deliberate, too detailed to dismiss entirely. Over the next few weeks, I went back to the coffee shop several more times. Each visit was uneventful, though I noticed a small sketch pad tucked near the register. He never borrowed my pen again. Eventually, I began to relax, treating the place like any other cafe. The memory of the sketch faded slowly into the back of my mind. One rainy afternoon, I came in soaked from a surprise storm. The shop was nearly empty, and he greeted me with a towel and a hot drink on the house. I thanked him, and we made small talk for the first time. He mentioned he liked to draw during slow hours and said he often practiced with quick portraits. I asked if he always asked permission first. He hesitated, then admitted he should have that day. I told him the sketch had caught me off guard. He looked genuinely apologetic and said it had not been his intention to make me uncomfortable. He said the moment I walked in, he had seen something expressive in my face and felt compelled to capture it. I listened quietly, unsure how to feel. Then he reached behind the counter and pulled out a folder. Inside were dozens of sketches of different people. Some were customers, others clearly not. He said it was his way of studying expressions, light, and angles. He handed me one page carefully wrapped in parchment paper. It was the sketch he had done of me, fully finished now and beautifully detailed. He told me I could keep it if I wanted. I held the paper in my hands, unsure what to say. The drawing was undeniably skillful, and despite how odd the situation had been, it did not feel malicious. In that moment, I saw the piece as what he claimed it was art created in a moment of inspiration. I thanked him and accepted the drawing, still unsure why he had chosen me that day, but no longer feeling threatened by it. We chatted a little more before I left, and I noticed how different the atmosphere felt now that I understood his intent. Sometimes the things that catch us off guard are not meant to scare us, only to connect with something inside us. I kept the drawing in a folder at home, tucked between old journals and letters. It became a reminder of how quickly perceptions can shift. What began as a strange encounter evolved into an unexpected understanding. That day in the coffee shop had not changed my life, but it had shifted something subtle in how I viewed others. I never saw him sketching me again, nor did he bring up that day again. But every time I returned, he greeted me with the same quiet nod, and something in that familiarity felt comforting. We never became close friends, but we shared a kind of silent respect. Sometimes that was enough. In the end, I learned that being seen, even unexpectedly, does not always mean being exposed. Sometimes it means being noticed for something you did not know you carried in your face or your posture. And sometimes the world reminds you that even small moments can hold lasting impressions. Story 4. It started like any other day. I went for a walk in the late afternoon, chasing that warm golden light that makes everything look just a little more magical. I had brought my phone, as always, ready to post something simple and peaceful. I stopped near a quiet street corner, framed by an old tree and some ivy-covered brick. I took a quick photo and added it to my Instagram story with a short caption about the weather. The moment felt peaceful, almost meditative. I stood there for a few more minutes, soaking in the fading sunlight. There was no one else around, or so I thought. It was one of those quiet moments when you feel alone but not lonely. I remember walking back home feeling refreshed and content. Later that evening, I checked my phone while curled up on the couch. A new message notification popped up on Instagram from a username I did not recognize. That was not unusual on its own. But when I opened it, my heart dropped. It was a photo of me taking the exact picture I had just posted. The image was from behind, clearly taken at the same moment I was holding up my phone. My stance, my outfit, the framing of the trees and bricks, it all matched perfectly. There was no mistaking it. Someone had been standing behind me, close enough to snap a picture, and I had not noticed them. I felt a cold rush down my spine. I looked at the username again. It was a random string of characters and numbers, nothing that gave away an identity. No profile photo, no posts, no followers. The account seemed like it had been made just to send me that photo. I tried to click on the image again, but it disappeared, vanished like it had never been sent. It must have been set to view once. My stomach twisted into knots. I scanned my memory of that afternoon again, trying to picture anyone nearby. I had not seen anyone. No footsteps, no shadows, no sense of presence behind me. It had been so quiet. Was someone hiding nearby or just incredibly careful? I started checking the corners of the photo I had taken. Had I missed something in the background? Was there a shadow I had not seen? But there was nothing unusual. It was like they had taken great care to be invisible, to not leave a trace except for the one they wanted me to see. My mind began racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. I decided to lock all my social media accounts and turn them private. I removed access from unknown devices and changed every password. I deleted the Instagram story I had posted. I also set up two-factor authentication on everything. It was not much, but it gave me a little control back. The rest of the night I felt uneasy. Every small sound in the hallway made me flinch. I double-checked my door locks and even taped a piece of paper to the inside of my peephole. My curtains, normally open just enough to let in moonlight, were drawn tightly shut. I barely slept. The next day, I filed a report with the platform. I described what had happened, gave them the username, and included a screenshot of the message notification. I doubted anything would come from it, but I had to try. I needed to feel like I was doing something. Waiting in silence would have driven me mad. For the next week, I kept to myself. I avoided public posts and only replied to messages from people I knew. I watched everything and everyone around me more carefully. I took different walking routes and kept my phone in my pocket instead of out in my hand. But my peaceful routine had become paranoid. but the message never came back. The account disappeared. I could not find any trace of it, even when I searched obsessively every night. Slowly, the fear began to fade. I told myself maybe it was just someone playing a stupid prank. Maybe it was just a coincidence or some sort of glitch. My mind tried to rationalize what my instincts screamed was wrong. Still, I could not shake the feeling that I had been seen, really seen, by someone who did not want to be known. It felt invasive in a way that words could not fully describe. I started using my phone camera less, especially in public. I took fewer photos. I began to crave more offline experiences, where eyes could not follow me so easily. One afternoon, weeks later, I returned to the same street corner. I had not planned to go back there, but my steps just carried me that way. The old tree was still there, its leaves beginning to turn gold. I stood in the same spot, facing the same bricks. I wondered if someone was watching again. But this time I was not afraid. I stood still and let the moment wash over me. I looked behind me and all around. No one was there. Just silence and a breeze rustling the branches. It felt like closure somehow. As I turned to leave, I noticed something I had not before: a small security camera mounted on a nearby building, aimed toward the sidewalk. It was old, maybe even broken, but it made me pause. I wondered if it had captured anything that day. I took a photo of it, just in case, and kept walking. Later that week, I contacted the building's office. I asked if they kept footage from the cameras. The manager was kind but told me the camera had not worked in years. It was just a leftover piece no one had taken down. That answer both disappointed and relieved me. If no footage existed, the trail ended there. With time, the experience became a strange memory, something I rarely talked about. But it taught me to be more aware, more cautious. I kept my privacy tighter and my circle smaller. It was not fear that stayed with me, but respect for how easily the illusion of safety can be broken. I eventually returned to photography, but I shared my pictures in smaller circles. I learned how to live with the vulnerability of being visible. Not everything needed to be posted. Not every moment needed an audience. Some were better kept for myself. And in the end, I decided that the power belonged to me again. I chose what I saw, what I shared, and how I let the world in. The unknown figure who sent that photo may have watched me once, but they did not own the moment. I did. Done. Story 5. I had a long day and did not feel like cooking, so I ordered Uber Eats. It was just a simple dinner, nothing fancy, just something to eat while I unwound on the couch. I tracked the driver as usual, and everything seemed normal. They pulled up outside, texted me that my order had arrived, and left it at my door. I picked it up, gave a quick thank you message through the app, and went back inside. I did not think twice about it until 20 minutes later, when I glanced out the window and saw the same car still idling outside. It was parked right across the street from my apartment, lights off, but engine running. At first, I assumed the driver might just be finishing paperwork or planning their next delivery. But an hour passed, then 2, and they were still there. I tried not to let it bother me, thinking maybe they were waiting for someone or had a reason to be there. But it was hard to ignore the feeling creeping in my chest. Every time I peeked through the blinds, the car was in the same spot. There was no movement, no one getting in or out, just a figure sitting motionless behind the wheel. Eventually, I turned off the lights inside and sat in the dark, watching. I thought maybe if they saw the apartment was quiet, they would finally leave. But nothing changed. They remained there like a statue, barely shifting in the seat. I debated calling someone, but I did not want to overreact if it was just a coincidence. Around midnight, I decided to document it. I took a few photos of the car from the window, careful not to draw attention. I even jotted down the license plate just in case. I started to wonder if I had somehow upset the driver or if they were mistaking me for someone else. The thoughts churned in my head and sleep became impossible. At about 1 a.m., I heard the faint sound of a car door opening. I moved to the side of the window to watch more closely. The driver stepped out slowly, stretching their legs like they had been sitting for too long. They did not look at my building directly but started pacing near the sidewalk. That made it worse. They were not looking at their phone, not talking, just pacing slowly and calmly. Occasionally, they would glance toward the apartment complex. I could not tell if they were looking at my unit, but the timing felt personal. It was too strange, too deliberate. I backed away from the window and locked all the doors again, even the ones I had already checked. I double-checked the sliding glass door in the back and the small window above the kitchen sink. My heart was pounding harder now, and I finally decided it was time to do something more serious. I called the non-emergency police line and explained what was happening. The operator listened carefully, asked for the license plate, and promised to send someone to check. I waited by the window, phone still in hand, until I saw a patrol car roll slowly down the street. As the patrol car approached, the driver quickly got back into their vehicle. They did not pull away immediately but sat there for a moment longer. Then they started the engine fully and drove off, disappearing into the night. The officer parked for a few minutes, then came to my door to talk. I explained everything to the officer, including the timeline and my concerns. They took notes and told me I had done the right thing. They promised to file a report and would drive around the area for a while to make sure the car did not return. I thanked them and closed the door, feeling only slightly better. The next day, I was still shaken. I opened the Uber Eats app and reviewed the delivery details. I found the driver's profile and sent a message through support explaining what had happened. They responded quickly and assured me the incident would be reviewed seriously. I did not order from Uber Eats for a while after that. I started cooking again, even when I was tired, just to avoid any possible interaction. I could not get that image out of my head, the driver sitting there just watching, not doing anything but making their presence known. A few weeks later, I got a call from the local police. They had been able to trace the driver and brought them in for questioning. It turned out I was not the only one they had made uncomfortable. Several other reports had come in from different neighborhoods about similar behavior. The authorities took it seriously, and the driver's access to delivery platforms was permanently revoked. But I was relieved when I heard that, and even more relieved to know I had not imagined everything. It had not been paranoia. Something was really off, and I had acted in time. In the months that followed, I kept my distance from all food delivery apps. I started going to the grocery store more often, and even found some joy in preparing my own meals again. It gave me a sense of control I did not realize I had lost. There was something grounding about it. Eventually, I went back to ordering online, but I chose different services and only used drop-off options with no contact. I avoided giving 5-star ratings right away, especially when drivers tried to linger or message too much. I set firm boundaries and kept to them. Looking back, I am thankful I trusted my instincts. That feeling of unease was not baseless, and I learned how to act on it calmly. I made sure to share my experience anonymously online, hoping others would learn from it. It is better to be cautious than to ignore the signs. That night taught me how subtle danger can be. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits across the street in the dark. Sometimes it watches to see how you react. But I reacted the right way. Now my home feels safe again. I still glance out the window at night sometimes, just to make sure everything looks normal. But I do it with a sense of strength, not fear. I know I can handle whatever comes next. The car never came back. The driver vanished from my life as quickly as they had entered it. And though the memory still lingers, it no longer controls me. I moved forward, a little wiser, a little more prepared. Story 6. I had been working from home for months when I decided I needed a change of scenery and a more professional environment. I found a co-working space near my apartment that seemed perfect, quiet, modern, and full of people who looked focused and busy. On my first day, I brought my laptop and settled into a corner desk, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness about this new routine. It felt good to be around others, even if we didn't interact much. After a few hours of work, I got up to stretch and grab a coffee. When I returned, something caught my eye on my laptop. There was a small sticky note stuck to the edge of the screen. The note had just 3 words written on it: "No more secrets." My heart skipped a beat. I looked around quickly, but nobody seemed to be paying attention to me or my laptop. I felt a chill run down my spine. I did not know who had left the note or why. Was it a joke, a warning, or something more serious? I tried to shake off the feeling and continued working, but the message lingered in my mind. What secrets could anyone possibly know about me? I considered the possibility that someone had access to my things or had been watching me. I checked my bag and laptop bag to see if anything was missing, but everything was as it should be. Still, the note felt like a puzzle with no answer. I kept glancing over my shoulder for the rest of the day, unable to focus completely. Over the next few days, I stayed alert. I noticed a few people casting quick glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Small things began to feel strange, the way my computer was positioned when I returned from breaks, or how my chair sometimes seemed slightly moved. I started to wonder if I had been targeted for some reason. But for what? I did not share much about my personal life with anyone there. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between 2 co-workers near the coffee machine. They were talking quietly, mentioning something about hidden cameras and privacy concerns in the building. My ears perked up, and I wondered if this was connected to the note. Could it be that someone was spying on the people in the co-working space? The thought made me uneasy. I decided to do some investigating of my own. I carefully inspected the area around my desk, looking for anything unusual. I checked behind the monitors, under the desk, and even the power outlets. There was nothing obvious, but I still felt watched. I realized I was becoming paranoid, but how could I not be? The note had shaken my sense of safety. One evening, I mentioned the note to the co-working space manager. She listened carefully and seemed concerned. She assured me that security cameras were only in common areas and that privacy was a priority for them. She promised to review the security footage and check if anyone had been near my desk without permission. That gave me a little relief, but the mystery remained unsolved. Days passed, and I began to notice small signs that someone was trying to communicate with me. Another sticky note appeared on my laptop, this time with a simple drawing of an eye. I started to feel like I was part of some strange game or message exchange. It was unnerving and confusing. I wondered if I should leave the co-working space altogether. Despite the fear, I did not want to give up on the environment I had worked hard to join. I valued the chance to focus without distractions and the chance to be around others. I decided to stay cautious but carry on. I installed extra security software on my laptop and changed my passwords. I also began backing up all my files frequently, just in case. Then, one afternoon, I found a printed email left on my desk. It was anonymous but written carefully, saying, "No one is as alone as they think." The email encouraged me to trust the people around me and to be open. It spoke about how everyone carries secrets and how sharing could bring freedom. The tone was strange, both threatening and comforting at the same time. I spent a long time thinking about the message. Was this someone trying to help me? Or was it part of the same mysterious warnings? I realized that maybe the real secret was my own fear and isolation. I had kept myself distant from the others, too busy working to connect. Perhaps the notes were a strange way of pushing me to open up. Slowly, I started to talk to some of the people around me. I shared a little about my work and asked about theirs. To my surprise, many were friendly and willing to chat. They spoke about their own struggles and the importance of community. I realized that the co-working space was more than just a place to work, it was a place to belong. One morning I arrived to find a small stack of sticky notes on my desk. Each one had a positive message like "You are not alone, and we see you." I smiled for the first time in weeks. The fear and tension were melting away. I was no longer trapped by the feeling that someone was watching me with bad intent. Instead, I felt seen and accepted. In the end, I never found out who left the first note on my laptop or the others that followed. It did not matter anymore. What mattered was that the experience had pushed me to confront my own fears and reach out. I had discovered a community that I could trust and a place where secrets did not have to weigh me down. Now when I walk into the co-working space, I do so with confidence. My laptop stays free of mysterious notes, but I am open to the connections around me. No more secrets, I remind myself, means no more hiding behind walls of silence and isolation. But I am ready to face whatever comes next with honesty and courage. The sticky note was a strange beginning, but it led me to a better ending. Story 7. Now, I had been feeling overwhelmed for months, maybe longer than I was willing to admit. Work stress, family obligations, and the constant noise of daily life had worn me thin. So when I came across the advertisement for a silent retreat, it felt like a sign. 3 days away from everything, in a peaceful countryside retreat center, sounded like exactly what I needed. I booked my spot online, paid the fee, and received the confirmation email almost instantly. The morning I left, I packed lightly, bringing only essentials and a few comfortable clothes. The drive took nearly 4 hours, winding through quiet roads until the signal on my phone disappeared completely. That felt like a good omen, a forced disconnection from the chaos. As I pulled into the gravel parking lot, I saw the retreat center nestled between trees, serene and modest. I took a deep breath, ready to begin this journey of silence and stillness. Inside the main building, I approached the reception desk where a woman stood quietly. I greeted her and mentioned my name and that I had signed up for the weekend retreat. She looked at me, then glanced at her clipboard without saying a word. After a moment, she shook her head slowly, still silent, and pointed to a list. My name was not on it. I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe she had missed it, or I had arrived earlier than expected. I showed her the confirmation email on my phone, including the payment receipt and booking ID. She studied the screen for a few seconds, then gave me a polite but firm smile and shook her head again. I felt my chest tighten a little, confused and uncertain. I asked, gently, if I could speak with someone in charge. A man appeared shortly after, dressed simply like the others, and listened as I explained the situation again. He maintained the same quiet expression and glanced at the clipboard. Then he too shook his head and gestured toward the door. I stood there stunned, holding my phone out, as if the evidence would suddenly convince them. I felt like I had stepped into a different reality, where nothing I said or proved mattered. They continued to refuse to acknowledge my reservation. I asked if I could still stay, even without being officially signed up, but the answer was clear through their gestures. It was a silent retreat, and they used no words, but the message was unmistakable. I was not welcome. I stood outside the building, unsure what to do next. For a moment, I considered driving back home, but something inside me resisted the idea. I had come here seeking peace, space to breathe in silence. The retreat center was surrounded by open land and a small wooded area. I decided to find a place nearby to sit and think, hoping the quiet would still offer some comfort. I walked toward the trees and found a bench near a small pond. I sat there for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. I had done everything right, paid in full, received confirmation, and yet they acted like I did not exist. I began to wonder if they had a reason. Had someone else taken my place? Was it a glitch in their system? Or was there something more intentional behind it? I stayed near the pond for hours, the sun slowly dipping behind the trees. Despite the strange rejection, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The silence was not just outside me, it started seeping inside too. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped questioning everything. For that evening, I just let myself be still. I decided to sleep in my car for the night, parked just at the edge of the lot. It was not comfortable, but I managed a few hours of rest. When morning came, I walked around the grounds, keeping a respectful distance from the main building. I saw other retreat attendees moving slowly between cabins, all quiet and peaceful. Their faces looked serene, even joyful. I wondered if that could have been me. Even without joining the official group, I continued spending time nearby for the second day. I brought food from my car and sat under a large oak tree, reading from a journal I had packed. I wrote down everything I was thinking, about how strange the experience had been, or about how much silence I still needed. I began to feel like I was creating my own retreat, on the outside looking in. By the third day, I noticed something unusual. The same receptionist who had first denied my check-in walked past me on a path. She paused for a moment, looked at me, and gave a very slight nod. Not a full greeting, not an apology, just a tiny acknowledgement. It caught me off guard. I nodded back, unsure what it meant. Later that morning, a different staff member quietly left a folded note on the bench where I had been sitting. There was no name, no message, just a printed quote. Sometimes, what you seek is not given to you by permission, but by presence. I held the note in my hands, reading it several times. I did not know if it was intended for me, but it felt like it was. I tucked it into my journal. As the day ended, I realized I had not spoken a single word in over 48 hours. I had not used my phone. I had not argued or demanded anything. And still, I felt more grounded than I had in a long time. The formal retreat had shut its doors on me, but the silence I sought found its way to me regardless. That, I realized, was enough. When I finally left the retreat grounds, I felt no resentment, only clarity. I would never understand why they denied my entry, and maybe it did not matter anymore. What mattered was that I had found what I came for, even if not in the way I expected. I returned home lighter, with a calmer mind and a deeper respect for stillness. In the weeks that followed, I created small spaces of silence in my life. No phones during meals, quiet walks in the early morning, or times set aside to just breathe and be. I learned that sometimes peace does not come from being invited into a space. Sometimes it comes from claiming that space within yourself. And that lesson, strange as its path was, changed me. Story 8. I started selling my old clothes online a few months ago. It was mostly a way to clear out space in my closet and earn a little extra cash. I would take clean photos, write detailed descriptions, and pack everything with care before sending them off to buyers. Most of the transactions went smoothly. People were friendly, and the reviews were positive. One afternoon, I received a small package in the mail. I assumed it was something I had ordered, or maybe a return. The return address was handwritten, and I did not recognize it. There was no company name, just a name I did not recognize. I opened the box without much thought. Inside was a small envelope and what looked like a folded cloth. I expected maybe a note of thanks or a returned shirt. Instead, what I found made my stomach drop. Tucked inside the cloth was a small plastic bag containing a lock of hair, human hair, dark, long, and tied at one end with a piece of red thread. At first I froze. I did not know what to think. Was it a mistake? A prank? I checked the envelope and found a note written in shaky handwriting. It said, "This felt like it belonged with your clothes." No name, no explanation, just that. I sat at the table, staring at the bag of hair. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical reason for it. Maybe someone thought it was funny. Maybe it was just someone trying to be strange. But the more I stared at it, the more unsettled I felt. I went through my recent orders to see if I could match the return address to any of the buyers. One of them had used a similar address format, but I could not confirm if it was the same person. That order had been for a long gray coat. It sold quickly, and I remembered the buyer had asked a lot of questions about its condition. I thought about throwing the hair away, but something stopped me. I placed it back inside the envelope and stored it in a drawer. I figured I might need it as evidence if things got worse. That night, I double-checked all my windows and doors before going to bed. I could not shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The next day, I tried to go about my routine. I told myself not to overreact, but when I checked my sales account, I noticed that the same buyer had left a strange review. It read, "Thank you for the coat. It smells like home." The message sent a chill down my spine. I reported the message to the platform, but they responded with a generic reply about following community guidelines. They said they would investigate the matter. I did not feel any safer after that. I started to wonder if the person had bought from me before, using different names or addresses. A week passed with no more packages, but the unease stayed with me. I kept checking my mailbox nervously. I watched my surroundings when I left my apartment. My eyes would scan for anyone lingering too long near my building. Everything felt like a potential threat. Then, another package arrived. This time it was a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name written in the same shaky handwriting. Inside was a piece of paper and a single hair taped to the center. The note said, "You always had the nicest hair." That was the moment I knew this was not just a prank. Someone had been watching me more closely than I realized. I decided to contact the authorities. I brought both packages with me and filed a report. The officer who helped me was kind but cautious. He said it was difficult to trace without a name or more substantial evidence. They told me to keep everything and call if anything else arrived. I was advised to limit my online activity and avoid sharing personal details. I updated all my privacy settings and removed my address from the platform when possible. I started selling fewer items and being more selective about buyers. Still, I could not stop thinking about who had sent the packages and why. I thought back to the coat and whether there had been something about it that connected me to the buyer. Maybe they had recognized me from somewhere, or maybe it was just random. Either way, I no longer felt anonymous online. A few days later, I received an email from a new account. The subject line read, "I want to see you wear it again." The message had no body, just that one sentence. I blocked the sender and took a screenshot to send to the police. They added it to the case file but said there was still not enough to act on. I stopped selling completely after that. I removed all listings and closed my account. I felt like I had invited something into my life that I could not control. I changed the locks on my door and installed a security camera facing the hallway. My home had become a place of tension instead of comfort. Despite the fear, I tried not to let it consume me. I leaned on a few close friends for support. They reminded me that I had done the right thing by reporting it and making changes to protect myself. Slowly, I began to feel a little more secure. It took effort to not live in constant fear. Weeks passed with no new messages or packages. Life began to feel more normal again. I started to sleep better and leave the apartment without scanning every shadow. The experience stayed with me, but I did not let it define me. I learned to move forward without forgetting what had happened. One day I received a call from the police. They told me they had identified the person behind the packages. It turned out to be someone with a history of sending similar items to other sellers. They had finally made a mistake and were caught after sending a similar package to someone who knew them. The officer assured me they would not be bothering anyone again. Relief washed over me. I had been waiting for closure, and now it had arrived. Knowing that the person was caught helped ease the fear that had gripped me for so long. I thanked the officer and hung up the phone, feeling lighter. I never reopened my online store. I decided that part of my life had run its course. Instead, I focused on things that made me feel safe and fulfilled. I took up new hobbies and spent more time with people I trusted. The memory of the hair in the mail still lingers sometimes, especially when I check my mailbox. But it no longer holds power over me. I faced something deeply uncomfortable and made it through. I reclaimed my space, my privacy, and my peace. And that, to me, was the best ending I could have hoped for. Story 9. I always set my Apple Watch to sleep mode before bed. The gentle buzz in the morning was a better alarm than any blaring noise, and the sleep tracking gave me a weird kind of comfort. I liked knowing my heart rate, my breathing, how still I stayed through the night. It became a habit, almost a ritual. I never expected it to turn on me. That night felt like any other. I brushed my teeth, dimmed the lights, and placed my phone face down on the nightstand. The bedroom was silent aside from the soft hum of the ceiling fan. I slipped under the blanket, tapped my watch to start sleep mode, and closed my eyes. I had no idea I would be waking up before the sun. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the buzz on my wrist snapped me out of a deep sleep. I sat up groggily, rubbing my eyes and looking at the screen. It did not display a reminder or alarm, not even a heart rate alert. It just showed a message in gray text on a black background. "You're not alone." For a second, I thought I had imagined it. I tapped the watch, trying to bring the message back, but it had already disappeared. The normal sleep mode screen returned, showing how many hours I had been asleep. No notifications, no alerts. My chest felt tight with unease, and I checked my phone just in case. There were no missed calls or messages. Nothing from the watch app, no updates, no system errors. I checked the settings and found no option that would explain such a message. I sat there in the dark for a while, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I convinced myself it must have been a bug or a dream. I turned on a small lamp, drank some water, and walked around the apartment to calm down. Every room looked exactly as it should. The door was locked, windows shut, everything still in place. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something was watching me. That message echoed in my mind. "You're not alone." I returned to bed and tried to sleep, but the rest of the night passed in fragments. I kept waking up, feeling like I had heard something or sensed movement. At one point, I could swear I heard a soft knock from the hallway, but when I got up to check, it was empty. Morning came slowly and not soon enough. The next day, I tried to brush it off. I told a coworker about the strange message, laughing about it like it was some harmless glitch. But deep down, I felt different, like something had shifted in my space, in my life. I kept checking my watch every hour, waiting for another message. It never came. Not that day. That night, I hesitated before activating sleep mode again. Part of me wanted to leave the watch on the nightstand and forget about it. But I was stubborn and maybe a little curious. I tapped sleep mode, pulled the covers up, and stared at the ceiling until I drifted off. At 3:14 a.m., it buzzed again. This time, I watched the screen light up before I even sat up. The same message, "You're not alone." The text disappeared after 3 seconds, just like before. I felt paralyzed. I looked around the room and listened carefully. The quiet was heavy, unnatural. I got up and turned on every light in the apartment. The kitchen, bathroom, living room, all empty. Still, I could not escape the sense that something was sharing the space with me. I called support for the watch company later that morning. I explained the situation calmly, leaving out my growing fear. The person on the other end ran through diagnostics with me. No logs showed anything unusual, no errors or third-party apps that could send messages like that. They had no explanation. I tried to forget about it again. I stopped wearing the watch to bed and switched to my phone's alarm. The buzzing stopped, and I hoped that whatever it was would fade away. But 3 days later, I found a note in my apartment. It was lying on the floor by the bathroom door. Just one line. "You're not alone." I stared at it, heart pounding. I lived alone. I had not had guests over in weeks. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the paper looked torn from a notebook I did not own. I locked every door, checked the windows again, and called the building manager. They confirmed no one else had access to my apartment. I started sleeping with the light on. I set up a small camera in the hallway just outside my bedroom. If someone was getting in, I would catch them. I placed another one by the front door. The footage the next morning showed nothing unusual. No movement, no shadows, no signs of life beyond my own. Still, the fear stayed with me. At work, I began to lose focus. I checked the camera footage on breaks and scrolled through forums late at night, looking for others who had experienced anything similar. Most of what I found was useless. Stories about glitches, ghost tales, paranoia. Nothing that matched exactly. The next time it happened, I was awake. I had not slept yet. I was lying in bed reading, my watch on the nightstand instead of my wrist. At 3:14 a.m., it vibrated all on its own. I looked at it without touching it. The message was different this time. "We see you." I grabbed the watch and threw it across the room. My breath caught in my throat, and I jumped out of bed to check every room again. The camera feeds were clean, the locks untouched. But that message had felt more personal, more direct. Not a malfunction. A threat. I thought about leaving, booking a hotel for a few days. But I could not afford it, and I knew running would only make me more anxious. Instead, I went to the store and bought new locks, a second deadbolt, and covered every camera on every device I owned. I even unplugged the smart speakers. That night, I slept with the watch powered off and inside a drawer. Nothing happened, and nothing happened the next night either. The silence was almost more unnerving than the messages. Then came the final night. I was watching TV, trying to stay awake, when I noticed my watch light up across the room. It had not been touched. It had no power source. But it glowed anyway. Slowly, the screen filled with the same phrase. "You're not alone." But instead of disappearing, it stayed. I walked over to it, cautiously picked it up, and tapped the screen. It did not respond. The message stayed on the display, unmoving. I turned the watch over and held down the power button. It finally shut off. The moment the screen went black, I heard a thud, from the closet. I froze, staring at the door just 10 feet away. The noise had been soft but unmistakable. Something was inside. I backed away and grabbed my phone, ready to call for help. But I stopped myself. Instead, I picked up a flashlight and walked to the closet. I opened the door. It was empty. Nothing but clothes, shoes, and an old suitcase. I exhaled shakily, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. As I turned to leave, I noticed something behind the suitcase. A small device, no bigger than a thumb drive, blinking faintly. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a tracker. My blood ran cold. Someone had planted it. Someone had been watching me. Maybe through the watch, maybe another way. But this proved I was not imagining things. I took the device to the police the next morning. They opened an investigation. They took the watch, the note, the tracker. Weeks passed without much news, but then I got a call. They had traced the device to a tech contractor with a history of surveillance work. He had done freelance work installing monitoring software into consumer electronics. He was arrested. The police believed he had hacked into dozens of devices, sending messages to manipulate people and observe their reactions. My case helped them make it public. It turned out I was not alone, but not in the way the message had meant. Now, months later, I sleep peacefully again. I no longer use smart watches or smart speakers. My new place is quiet, small, and exactly what I needed. I feel safe again, and I never take peace of mind for granted. Story 10. It started as just another normal day at work. I logged into ChatGPT like I usually did, ready to brainstorm some content ideas for a report I was helping with. The chat history was something I often relied on, especially when I needed to revisit earlier discussions or track previous drafts. But that morning, as I opened the history tab, I noticed something strange. There were conversations I had never written, inquiries I had never made. The tone of the messages was different, too, more blunt and sometimes scattered. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten writing them during a busy day. I even scrolled through older chats, thinking maybe I had been more distracted than I realized. But the further I looked, the more obvious it became that someone else had used the same chat. Some of the queries were completely outside the scope of my work. One message asked for a list of financial institutions in another country, which had nothing to do with my tasks. Another had questions about a software I had never even heard of. My heart started to pound as I read on, wondering how this had happened. I had always assumed the account was mine alone. I had not shared it, and there was no logical reason someone else should have access. I checked the browser login information and noticed a device listed from a location I had never visited. It had accessed the chat platform just 2 nights before, around 11 p.m. I was not working at that hour and had not left my computer on. Oh, that confirmed it. Someone had used the chat history while pretending to be me or simply without realizing it was a shared login. My first instinct was to log out from all devices and change the password immediately. I went through every setting, from account recovery details to 2-step verification. I also checked the work email connected to the account, but there had been no alerts or login attempt warnings. It was eerie how smoothly someone had slipped in without triggering anything. That kind of quiet intrusion left a sour feeling in my gut. I started wondering if it had been someone from work. The company shared devices for interns or rotating staff sometimes, and I had used a shared laptop once when mine was under repair. That might have been it. If I had forgotten to log out, someone could have seen the tab and clicked through. But even then, it was unsettling to know my past chats were sitting there, open to anyone who stumbled on them. I decided to talk to it quietly, just to see if they could track the device or the login time more precisely. I framed it as a general concern about privacy on shared devices. The technician was kind and helpful. He confirmed there had been multiple device logins on the same account over the past month. That confirmed what I had feared, that this was not a one-time accident. He offered to do a more in-depth scan on the office network to check for unauthorized activity. I agreed, thankful someone was taking it seriously. While waiting for the report, I kept using ChatGPT, but in a more cautious way. I avoided any sensitive work-related data or discussions and cleared the history after every session. It made work a bit harder, but I felt safer doing it that way. A week later, it got back to me. They had traced the second device to a work terminal used by a former employee who had not returned their equipment. That was a relief in a way, knowing it was not a current coworker snooping. The account had likely stayed logged in, and the former employee had either not noticed or not cared. Thankfully, there was no indication that the chat history had been copied or used against me. Still, it was a learning moment. I started logging out of every tool at the end of each day, no matter how minor. I also suggested to the team that we implement session timeout settings for shared devices. Management agreed and rolled out the changes within the month. It felt good to have contributed to making our digital environment more secure. As for the former employee, the company reached out to recover the equipment. I never heard if they responded, but the unauthorized device went offline shortly after. My ChatGPT account was now locked down tighter than ever, and I felt a renewed sense of control. I kept my new habit of clearing history and using unique passwords for every tool. It became second nature after that incident. Eventually, I stopped checking my chat history for odd messages. I knew now that it was mine again, truly mine. The unsettling feeling that had followed me for weeks began to fade. I even returned to using it for creative work and team planning like before. What mattered was that I had taken steps to protect myself and learned something valuable in the process. What started as a moment of confusion turned into a situation I was able to resolve. It reminded me how important it is to be vigilant in the digital space. Tools like ChatGPT are powerful, but they are only as secure as the habits of their users. I never forgot that lesson, and I never let another login session go unchecked. Story 11. I decided to take a shared scooter home one evening after work. It was getting late, and the bus schedules did not fit my timing well. The streets were mostly empty, which made the ride quick and peaceful. I unlocked the scooter with the app on my phone and started rolling toward my apartment. It felt convenient and a little adventurous to use this new mode of transport. As I rode, I noticed the cool breeze and the distant sounds of the city winding down. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to check. A notification appeared on the screen from AirDrop. I dismissed it without much thought, assuming it was just a random message from someone nearby. The scooter ride continued smoothly, and I enjoyed the brief escape from my usual routine. Suddenly, another AirDrop notification popped up. This time, the message preview caught my attention. It displayed my full home address. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen. How did someone know my address? More importantly, how did this message reach me on a shared scooter, where anyone could be around? I quickly locked my phone and looked around nervously. The street was quiet, and no one seemed suspicious, but my unease grew. My mind raced with questions about who could be sending these messages and why they knew where I lived. The calm ride suddenly felt dangerous. I decided to stop and think about what to do next. But I pulled the scooter over to the sidewalk and took a deep breath. I opened my phone again carefully, checking if there were more messages. Another one appeared, this time with a simple sentence, "I see you." The chilling words made my skin crawl. I felt exposed and vulnerable, even though I was surrounded by empty streets and dim lights. I started walking the scooter slowly, watching for anyone nearby. No one was visible, but the messages kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. They mentioned my building, my floor, and even details about the times I usually came and went. It was clear someone had been watching me for a while. The feeling of being followed settled heavily on my chest. I thought about calling someone, maybe the police or a close friend. But I was unsure if it would help or if it would escalate the situation. I decided to text a trusted friend with a brief message about what was happening. I included my location and asked them to call me as soon as possible. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a lifeline I needed more than ever. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the call. The messages slowed down, but I stayed alert, constantly checking my surroundings. The city noises seemed louder now, every distant car or footstep setting my nerves on edge. I could not shake the feeling that eyes were on me, even though I saw no one. The vulnerability of having my home address broadcasted like that was terrifying. Finally, my phone rang. Hearing a familiar voice gave me a small sense of relief. I explained the situation quietly, trying not to draw attention. My friend urged me to stay where I was until they could come meet me. They also suggested I block AirDrop to stop the messages. I quickly changed my phone settings to receive files only from contacts, hoping to cut off the stranger. But with the phone conversation steadying my nerves, I continued slowly toward my building. I watched every shadow and movement, feeling both cautious and determined. When I reached the entrance, I quickly scanned the area and saw no sign of anyone suspicious. I took a deep breath and entered the lobby, feeling slightly safer inside the familiar walls. I locked the door behind me and hurried up the stairs to my apartment. My mind was still spinning, but I tried to focus on simple actions like locking each door and window. I checked the peephole for anyone lurking outside and switched on the hallway lights. It was a small comfort to be inside, but the sense of being watched did not disappear entirely. That night I barely slept. I kept my phone close but on silent, afraid of more messages popping up. I considered calling the police, but I worried that without clear evidence, it would be hard to act. Instead, I spent hours researching ways to protect my privacy better and secure my digital life. I learned about disabling certain phone features and tightening app permissions. The next day, I reached out to the shared scooter company and reported the incident. They took my complaints seriously and promised to review security protocols and monitor suspicious activity. They also offered a refund and a temporary credit for my inconvenience. It was a small consolation, but it felt good to know they cared. I also changed all my passwords and added two-factor authentication to every account linked to my phone. I installed an app to monitor incoming connections and alerts for any unusual activity. Slowly, I felt like I was regaining control. The experience had shaken me deeply, but I refused to let fear dominate my life. Weeks passed, and the strange AirDrop messages stopped. I returned to using the scooter occasionally, but with more caution. I made a habit of scanning the area carefully before unlocking any shared device. I also kept my phone settings strict to avoid unexpected file requests. The memory of those messages stayed with me, a reminder to stay vigilant. Over time, I shared my story with friends and coworkers, hoping to raise awareness about digital privacy risks. Many were surprised to learn how vulnerable a person could be through a simple feature like AirDrop. I encouraged them to review their phone settings and be cautious when using shared technology. The conversation felt empowering and helped me heal. The incident taught me valuable lessons about personal safety in the digital age. I realized that technology, while convenient, can also open doors for intrusion and fear. Being proactive and informed was the best defense I could have. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts and act quickly when something felt wrong. Despite the scare, I refused to let it change who I was or how I lived. I kept riding the scooter, walking my neighborhood, and enjoying the simple moments of life. I made peace with the fact that some risks come with modern living, but that I had the tools to protect myself. The messages had stopped, and my life moved forward with renewed strength. In the end, I felt proud of how I handled the situation. I faced fear head-on and took practical steps to secure my world. The experience, though frightening, made me more aware and confident. It reminded me that even in moments of vulnerability, I could find courage and take back control. That knowledge gave me peace I had not known before. Story 12. I woke up that morning feeling rushed and a little off. I had slept later than usual, and everything was a bit chaotic as I hurried to get ready. In my scramble, I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone, but I forgot my work badge. It was the one thing I always kept close, the small card that gave me access to the office. I cursed myself silently as I realized it was missing. I arrived at the building a little after 9 in the morning, still feeling frazzled. At the entrance, the security guard looked up as I approached and asked to see my badge. I explained that I had forgotten it at home. The guard frowned but then checked his screen. His eyes widened slightly as he told me, "You already clocked in an hour ago." I blinked, confused and stunned. That could not be right. I checked my watch. It was 9:15. There was no way I had been in the office at 8:15, especially since I had just left my house. I explained this to the guard, who suggested I talk to the front desk. Still perplexed, I stepped inside and headed to the reception area. The receptionist was busy but looked up as I approached. I told her what the guard had said. She typed something into her computer and nodded toward the security office. "Maybe someone used your badge or the system glitched," she said quietly. I thanked her and made my way back. My mind raced. How could someone have clocked in using my badge? Was it lost or stolen, or was something else going on? The feeling of unease crept in. At the security office, the officer pulled up the entry logs. There it was, clear as day. My badge number had been scanned at 8:15 in the morning. The camera showed a figure entering the building, but the image was blurry and dark. It looked like me, but something about the posture and the way the person moved was off. I told the officer about my morning routine and my late start. He nodded but said the system was certain it was my badge. I tried calling my coworkers, asking if anyone had seen me around earlier or if they had heard anything strange. Most said they arrived after 9 and had not noticed anything unusual. A few joked that maybe I had developed a time machine. The thought made me uneasy but also gave me a momentary laugh. Still, the mystery of who had used my badge remained. I went to my manager's office and explained the situation. She looked concerned but calm. "We will review the security footage for the whole floor," she said. "If someone is impersonating you or using your badge without permission, we need to find out now." I agreed. It felt surreal. How could someone have gotten in using my identity? It was a violation that felt deeply personal. The security team worked through the day, pulling footage from various cameras. They found the figure from the entrance camera and followed it deeper into the building. The person seemed to know exactly where to go, moving with purpose. At one point, they stopped by my desk, which was still empty because I had not yet arrived. The footage showed the figure sitting down and pretending to work for a few minutes before leaving. When the footage was reviewed, it was clear the person was not me, but they looked very similar. Same height, similar clothes, even similar hair color. The security team theorized that someone might have been casing the office or attempting some form of identity theft. I felt a chill. What if they had been planning something worse? I started wondering about my personal information and how safe I really was. That evening, I went home feeling tired and uneasy. I thought about everything that had happened that day and how my sense of security had been shaken. I called the company's department and requested that they change all my passwords and monitor my accounts. They agreed and said they would keep an eye on any suspicious activity. I appreciated their quick response, but it still felt like my privacy had been invaded. Over the next few days, I took extra precautions. I got a new badge, one with extra security features. I changed my routines, arriving at different times to avoid being predictable. I also installed a small personal camera in my car just in case. I told a few trusted coworkers what had happened so they could watch out for anything strange. It was exhausting to live on alert, but I knew I had to protect myself. Slowly, the sense of normalcy returned. There were no further incidents, and the security team reassured me that the situation was being handled. The mystery figure was never caught, but the system was now stronger and more vigilant. I learned how important it was to stay aware and not take my safety for granted. That experience changed how I viewed trust and security in my daily life. Reflecting on it now, I see how easily things can be out of control without warning. Something as simple as forgetting my badge revealed vulnerabilities I had never considered. I am more cautious but also more confident because I face the problem head-on. The support from my workplace and friends helped me feel less alone in the strange situation. In the end, I realized that while some questions remain unanswered, I had taken back control. I was still me, and no one could replace that. The badge was just a card, but my identity was mine to protect. I moved forward with renewed awareness and a quieter strength, knowing I could handle the unexpected. It was a strange chapter in my life, but it ended with me standing firm and ready for whatever came next. Story 13. I had been looking forward to the concert for weeks. It was an artist I had loved since my teenage years, and finally getting tickets felt like a dream coming true. I bought the tickets online late one night, the excitement barely contained as I completed the purchase. The confirmation email arrived quickly, and I printed it out to have on hand. I knew the venue was downtown, somewhere I had never been before. A few days later, I came home to find an envelope in my mailbox that I had not expected. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, and there was no return address. Curious, I opened it carefully and pulled out a folded map. At first glance, it looked like a typical city map, but there was something odd about it. A red circle was drawn around the exact location of the concert venue. I turned the map over to see if there was any message on the back, but it was blank. I wondered who had sent it and why. Was it just a coincidence, or was someone trying to tell me something? The red circle seemed deliberate, as if someone wanted to make sure I knew exactly where the concert would be. The next day, I showed the map to a friend and asked if they had any idea who might have sent it. They shrugged and suggested it could be a prank or maybe from a fan of the same artist. The idea of a prank made me uncomfortable. I did not want to imagine someone watching me or trying to send me messages without my knowledge. Despite the unease, I decided to focus on the positive. The concert was only a week away, and I was determined to enjoy it. I planned the route, checked public transportation schedules, and even looked up nearby restaurants to visit before the show. The red circle on the map had only made the venue stand out more in my mind. On the day of the concert, I left early to avoid any surprises. The city streets were busy, and I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as I approached the area marked on the map. When I arrived at the venue, it looked just like the pictures I had seen online. The line for entry was already forming, filled with fans buzzing with anticipation. As I waited, I glanced again at the map in my hand. The red circle had become a strange sort of companion on this trip. I thought about the person who might have sent it and why. Was it someone who cared, someone trying to help me find my way, or was it something more mysterious? Once inside, the music started, and all those questions faded away. The lights, the sound, and the energy of the crowd pulled me in completely. I sang along to every song, feeling connected to thousands of people who shared the same passion. In that moment, nothing else mattered except the music and the joy it brought me. After the concert, I walked back to the bus stop, still holding the map. The night was cool and quiet, the city lights twinkling around me. I realized that the map, the red circle, and the unknown sender had become part of my experience in a way I had not expected. It was a reminder that sometimes life sends strange gifts that we can choose to accept or ignore. Days later, I decided to scan the map and send it to a few friends who loved puzzles and mysteries. None of them could figure out who might have sent it or why. I thought about keeping it forever, as a keepsake of the night and the strange journey it had taken me on. It was a small mystery, but one that added something special to the memory of the concert. Looking back, I understood that the map with the red circle was not about fear or warning, but about direction. It pointed me to a place where I felt alive and happy. It reminded me that sometimes strangers can touch our lives in unexpected ways. And in a world full of uncertainty, even a simple map can become a symbol of hope and adventure. I never did find out who sent the map. But that was okay. The mystery gave me a story to tell, a secret thread woven into the fabric of my life. I kept the map tucked away safely, a quiet reminder that sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination. Story 14. I picked up the rental car on a late Friday afternoon, just as the sun was starting to dip behind the tall buildings. The lot was mostly empty, save for a few tired cars that had been there too long. I didn't think much of the car I chose, just a simple sedan, but it looked clean enough from the outside. The agent handed me the keys with a quick smile and a clipboard full of paperwork. I was eager to get on the road, excited for the weekend ahead. When I opened the driver's door, a small yellow post-it note caught my eye stuck under the visor. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged, as if it had been there for a while. The note simply read, "Call me if she finds out." No name, no number, just those 5 words. I felt a sudden shiver run down my spine. What could it possibly mean? Who was she? And why would someone want me to call them if she found out? I looked around quickly, half expecting someone to be watching, but the parking lot was deserted except for a janitor sweeping leaves near the entrance. I tucked the note into my pocket, deciding I would call if there was any hint of trouble, but for now I was curious but cautious. I slid into the seat and started the engine. The radio crackled softly, playing an old song I liked, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Driving away, I thought about the note more than I wanted to. It seemed like a message meant for someone else, or maybe a joke left behind by the previous renter. But what if it wasn't? What if there was some secret or danger I had unknowingly stepped into? The road ahead was quiet, and I tried to push the thoughts out of my head. I was here for a break, a chance to clear my mind, not to unravel a mystery. The weekend passed slowly. I kept the note hidden but on my mind. I went to a few familiar places, grabbed coffee, walked through parks, and enjoyed the solitude. The car was comfortable, and the miles rolled by smoothly. Still, every time I glanced at the note, I wondered about the story behind it. Why did it say if she finds out? Who was the she and what was the secret? On Sunday evening, I stopped for gas at a small station just off the highway. The attendant was an older man who smiled kindly and asked if I was traveling far. I thought about mentioning the note but decided against it. Instead, I asked if he had ever seen anything strange around the area. He chuckled and shook his head, telling me the town was quiet these days. I paid, got back in the car, and drove on. That night, as I parked the car back at the rental agency, the note still burned in my pocket. I pulled out my phone and debated calling the mysterious number. There was no number on the note, just those words. So how was I supposed to call? I felt silly for even considering it. Maybe the note was a prank, a leftover joke from someone who had used the car before. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. The next morning, I returned the car and handed the keys to the attendant. I mentioned the note casually, expecting confusion or surprise, but he just nodded and said he would look into it. I wondered if he already knew about it. Did it happen often? Was this some secret game people played? He did not offer any answers, and I left feeling more puzzled than before. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about the note. I even checked my phone for any messages or calls I might have missed, but there was nothing. No mysterious number appeared, no voice messages, no text alerts. It was like the note existed in a bubble of its own, a cryptic warning or invitation that went nowhere. Still, part of me was intrigued, wanting to know what would happen if I actually tried to follow through. Curiosity got the better of me one evening when I sat down to write a message into my phone. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What would I say? "Hello, I found your note in the rental car." That sounded strange, like opening a door that should be left closed. But I typed it anyway and then deleted it. I was not ready, or maybe I never would be. Days turned into a week, and the mystery settled into the back of my mind, like a small knot I could ignore but never fully untie. I went back to my routine, to work and friends and family. Life moved forward, as it always does. The note became a quiet secret between me and the unknown writer, a story that might never have an ending. One afternoon, I found myself walking past the rental lot again, just out of habit. I stopped and looked at the rows of cars lined up like soldiers ready for their next mission. I imagined the previous renter, or maybe the next one, finding that same note and wondering the same questions. Did anyone ever call? Did anything ever happen? As I turned to leave, I smiled quietly to myself. Maybe some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. Maybe the note was a test, a reminder that life has secrets and surprises we cannot control. And maybe, just maybe, It was a sign that sometimes we need to be careful, but not afraid. I walked away from the lot feeling lighter. The note was no longer a source of fear or confusion. It was simply a story I carried with me, a strange encounter on a quiet afternoon. And in the end, that was enough. Story 15. I was excited when I finally bought the smart mirror. It seemed like a great addition to my bedroom, combining technology with something as simple as a mirror. The mirror had all these features that promised to help with my morning routine. It could display the weather, news, and even play music. Setting it up was easy, and I spent the first morning testing all its functions. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. The mirror showed me the time and daily updates while I got ready. I liked how it synced with my phone and made my mornings smoother. It was impressive how technology was blending into everyday objects in such a seamless way. I started to depend on it more than I thought I would. One night I was scrolling through social media when I came across a video that caught my eye. It was from a local news outlet talking about the risks of smart home devices. The reporter mentioned that some of these gadgets had been hacked or misused to invade people's privacy. I felt a chill run down my spine because I suddenly wondered if my smart mirror could be compromised. Curious and a little nervous, I decided to check the mirror's settings carefully. I dug into the app that controlled the device and looked for any strange activity. At first, nothing unusual showed up. But then I noticed a small tab labeled live stream that I had never seen before. It was turned on, and it showed a live feed from my bedroom. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately turned the stream off, but the damage was done. I felt violated, like someone had been watching me without my knowledge. I started to panic and wondered who could have been on the other end of that stream. Was it the company? A hacker? Or someone else entirely? The thought of being watched so closely made me feel sick. I unplugged the mirror from the wall and took a step back. The idea that a device I trusted to help me with my routine was secretly recording me was hard to accept. I remembered the times I had been alone in the room, talking to myself, or just getting ready for bed. All of those moments had been exposed. I felt naked in a way I never had before. The next morning, I contacted the company's customer service. I wanted answers. They told me the smart mirror was designed to have a live streaming feature, but it should never be enabled without the user's consent. A representative apologized and said they would investigate. They also recommended I reset the device to factory settings and update the firmware immediately. While waiting for their response, I searched online for others who might have had similar experiences. I found forums filled with people complaining about smart devices spying on them. Some shared stories of cameras turning on by themselves, microphones recording private conversations, and even personal data being leaked. It was terrifying to realize I was not alone. I decided to remove the smart mirror completely. I could not trust it anymore, not after what I found out. I packed it carefully in its box and prepared to return it. The experience had shaken my faith in modern technology. I realized how easy it was to forget that these devices are connected to the internet and could be vulnerable. A few days later, the company confirmed they had found a bug in the system that caused the live streaming feature to activate without warning. They assured me it was not intentional and promised to fix it with a software update. They offered a full refund and a discount on their other products as an apology. Despite that, I knew I could never feel comfortable with a smart mirror again. I reflected on how quickly technology is advancing and how little time we have to understand the risks involved. It made me more cautious about what gadgets I bring into my home. Privacy had always been important to me, but this incident made it a priority. I started researching ways to protect myself better and control what I share online and offline. One of the lessons I learned was to always read the fine print. I realized I had rushed into buying the mirror because it looked cool and modern. I had not taken the time to fully understand what it could do or what risks came with it. Now I am more careful and always look for reviews and warnings before making a purchase. In the end, I did not let the experience ruin my life, but it changed how I see the world. I am grateful for the awareness it gave me, even if it came at a personal cost. Technology is amazing, but it is not without dangers. Being informed and cautious is the best way to stay safe. I still look in the mirror every morning, but now I prefer the old-fashioned kind. No cameras, no microphones, just glass and reflection. It feels like a small victory to reclaim that simple privacy. I am reminded every day that some things are better left untouched by the digital world. The Smart Mirror episode will stay with me, a warning and a story to share. It showed me how easy it is to take privacy for granted and how important it is to protect it fiercely. I am stronger now because I faced that invasion head-on and took control back. And that is a good feeling to have. Story 16. I was traveling alone for the first time in months. The airport was bustling with early morning travelers, all rushing to catch their flights. I made my way to the new facial recognition kiosk that had been installed to speed up the boarding process. It was sleek and modern, with a large screen and a camera that seemed to watch my every move. As I approached the kiosk, the screen lit up suddenly. Before I had even looked at the camera or scanned my ticket, the machine greeted me by name. The voice was calm but clearly artificial. It said, "Welcome back, how are you today?" I froze, surprised and a little uneasy. How did it know who I was before I even started the check-in process? I looked around to see if anyone else had witnessed this, but the nearby travelers were focused on their own tasks. The kiosk seemed to operate independently. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to play along. I said, "I'm doing well, thank you." Then I carefully looked into the camera as instructed. The kiosk scanned my face quickly and then displayed my flight information on the screen. Everything matched perfectly, down to the seat number I had selected online the night before. I found it impressive but still a bit creepy. The idea that a machine could recognize me so easily made me wonder about the extent of surveillance at the airport. While waiting for my boarding pass to print, I tried to shake off the strange feeling. I told myself that facial recognition technology was becoming common and that airports needed faster ways to handle crowds. Still, the personal greeting had unsettled me. It felt like the machine knew me better than a stranger should. I decided to observe the other kiosks nearby. None of them spoke to the travelers like mine did. It was as if mine was programmed differently or had some extra features activated. I wondered if it was a beta test or if the airport was experimenting with a more personalized experience for frequent flyers. The thought made me curious, but also a little paranoid. After collecting my boarding pass, I continued through security. The familiar announcements and procedures provided some comfort. Yet, I could not stop thinking about the greeting. Was it just a programmed phrase triggered by facial recognition?